I'd like us this morning to focus on the longer of the two readings, the one from Isaiah 58. But before we go on to that, I don't want us to miss that incredible verse 8 in Micah chapter 6 that was echoed in the song that we have just sung. For best part of 30 years, this has been blue-tacked. It's feeling a bit tatty now, been blue-tacked to my study wall. This is what the Lord asks of you. Only this: to act justly, to love tenderly, or to love mercy is another way it's translated, and to walk humbly with your God. I think it's one of those verses in the Bible that if all the Bible sadly burnt away, it's one of the bits that I would hope would be saved. It's an extraordinary verse and a beautiful verse. Now, on the creative worship part of our church, over there on the tables, there are some sheets with variations of that verse on. And if you want to sort of mosey on over there and fill them in, you could do that. And you can stick it on your fridge or on your toilet door or somewhere like that, somewhere where you will see it. For it typifies, for me, the life of faith. So I'll leave that with you. If you don't want to do as Mabel's done, bravely stand up and walk across and start colouring in. Grab one afterwards and do it at home while your partner is fast asleep. You will have noticed from the notices, those of you that receive them, either in hard copy or by email, that during Lent, which starts on Wednesday, boy, what a busy day we've got on Wednesday, and I've got something to add to that. During Lent, there are some daily reflections based around the Methodist way of life and soul food that Ben has been putting together. Now, hands up those of you who've heard of the Methodist way of life. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant, thank you. That's more. I thought there wasn't going to be any. Now, there are 12 aspects of the Methodist way of life. What it is to follow Jesus as a Methodist Christian, or a Christian who is a Methodist. There's pray and share and live and open. They're all one words. But in Lent, because there's one each day, there's only room for 7. So we've got serve, flourish, worship, notice, tell, learn, care. Okay, so that leaves 5 spare. And one of them is justice. Or is actually, sorry, not justice, is challenge. They're all one word, challenge. And the line that goes with it on the Methodist Church website is challenge injustice. So that's where we're focusing this morning. Challenge injustice. Why? Why do we have to challenge injustice as followers of Jesus? It's going to take me a little longer than that, Jill. What were you going to say? Because it's wrong. Yeah, because it's wrong. Finish this phrase. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is... There's variations, but for the good to do nothing. The emphasis is on do. What I'm going to do this morning is talk. And actually, talk isn't good enough. That was a great song, Keith. Thanks for choosing that. That we shouldn't just be content with singing, said that song. Not just content with talking, it's about doing. So I've got a challenge for those of you who are in house groups. I know you will have your Lenten study. I get that. But can I ask you, if during Lent you might want to do something in terms of challenging injustice. Do it during Lent and see what happens. So to Isaiah 58. In this chapter, God is having a go at his people. So he says, shout it out loud, do not hold back, raise your voice like a trumpet. He's talking to Isaiah here. Declare to my people their rebellion and to the house of Jacob their sins. He's having a go. He is fed up to the back teeth of the way they have behaved. Now, I have no doubt that these are the words that God wanted to say to God's people. But how did Isaiah know that was what God wanted to say to God's people? How did Isaiah know? Now, those of you who know something about Muslims will know that the Quran, they believe, was dictated word for word by Allah to Muhammad in Arabic. So, if you come across an English translation of the Quran, Muslims will tell you that is not a true copy of the Quran. They have to learn their Quran in Arabic because God dictated to Muhammad. So, did God dictate to Isaiah what God wanted the people to hear? Or is the process more complex? Was Isaiah involved as a person in this delivery of what God wanted to say to his people? Let's explore that for a bit. I believe that Isaiah was a great listener. A listener in the sense that we looked at earlier. Ears, eyes, heart, undivided attention. I think all the prophets were great listeners. We know them for being talkers, well, writers, but talkers, people who, in their words, inspired and cajoled and drove the people to be the people that God wanted them to be. But they were speakers because fundamentally they were great listeners. And that's not just a sort of one-to-one, A to B with C listening and D hanging on, as we did earlier. That was listening to the world and the community in which they were set. So Isaiah walked around with his eyes open, his ears open, his heart open, listening for what was going on in the community. So, for example, fasting. Isaiah knew that the purpose of fasting was to get the faster in closer contact with God. And some of you here will fast. Because in fasting, as this spiritual discipline takes place, you become aware of your need for God. But Isaiah, knowing that, was looking around his community, and there were the people who were fasting, and they were giving it some to somebody else. In fact, Isaiah tells us it got to such a pitch that people were punching each other. If you're thinking of fasting today, come to the church lunch. Penny will tell you, well, I will tell you, Penny says to me, David, I don't think you should fast. You get very grumpy. Which actually defeats the point. Yeah? So Isaiah was going round listening to what was going on in the community. And what was he hearing as he walked around this community of God's people? Of God's people. He was noting the reality of their lives in terms of poverty, hunger, people trapped, lack of clothing, people oppressed and imprisoned. And he was listening to this, observing this, noticing this. Notice is another aspect of the Methodist way of life. He was noticing this, but he was also listening to God. And listening to God's intention of what community life should be like. Wider community than just what we might call church that we've looked at before. He was looking at a place where there is enough sharing so that everyone has enough. That's God's intention, that everyone should have enough. Not, I've got lots. It's a shame about you because you haven't got enough. God's intention is that the creation that he has made should flourish. Human beings, yes, but the whole of creation. God's intention is that everybody should grow to their full potential. So Isaiah is listening to the community, and he's listening to what God's saying, and he notices that there's a difference. So he knows he must act. But there's a challenge in this. It's one thing to see something as unjust. It's a huge step up to put that in God's mouth. I could say to you, it is unjust that the poorest people in this world should suffer the impact of climate change in a greater way than those of us who have caused it. And you could take that or leave it. I hope you would take it, because it happens to be true, I believe. It is another thing, a huge step up, to say, I, the Lord of hosts, abhor your behaviour that has resulted in my people in the global south suffering. That's a big step up. To go from I think to God says. And what did Jennifer's reading end? The mouth of the Lord has spoken. The very end of chapter 58. So, why did Isaiah feel able to make that step up? He felt able to do it because he knew who God was, who God is, who God will be. Our God is a God of justice. He knew that from reading his scriptures. He knew that from his encounter with God. And so he felt able to say these words, knowing that those were God's words too. So why do we challenge injustice? Why do we challenge injustice, Jill? Because it's wrong. And because we follow and serve a God of justice. So, Christians who wear Methodist hats, or no hats at all, those of us who follow Jesus, we are called to challenge injustice. How might we do this? We can speak out, and we're going to need to speak out. I believe, so I'm not saying it the Lord says, I believe we are moving into an age where it is important that Christians speak out for justice and the integrity of all people. For that is going to be challenged. We can protest, and this is where my Ash Wednesday bit comes in, but it's a prayer protest. If you've read the notices, you will see that the eco tip for this week is an event that Tear Fund are co-organising in London, a prayer event at St John's, Waterloo, and then going to the Department of Energy and Net Zero for a prayer vigil. I'm going. If anybody else wants to travel with me and enjoy my company, then you're welcome to. And if you don't want to enjoy my company, just go separately. There's an online prayer option, and there's a link in the notices to all of those things. So we can pray, we can speak out, we can protest, and we can do. I was conscious as we were singing that last song. I've only been here 18 months, but I know some of the stuff that you folk are already doing. Thank you for that. Clothing those who haven't got clothes, giving food to those who haven't got food, respecting people who the rest of society seems to have thrown on one side. Thank you for those challenges of injustice. What is God calling us to do now? You as an individual, and I think more particularly perhaps during Lent, for house groups. What challenge to injustice might you engage in your house group? And if you don't go to a house group, what is God calling you to do as we seek to be followers of Jesus, worshippers and servants of the God of justice? Let's be still for a few moments before we sing our next song.